In the year 1871, Japan saw two major events: the abolishment of the feudal domains and the creation of the Imperial Japanese Army. The samurai who served as retainers to the daimyo and fought in their feudal armies lost their positions. The now former samurai became part of the new social class known as the Shizoku. Their old privileges and status were lost. In this Meiji Era Japan, former samurai would attempt to adapt to their new reality, while others tried to fight against it. In this video, we'll examine the roles the former samurai and other Shizoku played in the rebellions, military, and politics in Meiji Era Japan. During the Edo era, the Tokugawa shogunate operated under a political structure referred to by historians as the Bakuhan system. Baku was short for Bakufu, while Han was the term for the domains governed by the daimyo who acted as the feudal vassals of the shogun. Following the defeat of the Tokugawa shogunate in the Boshin War, the Han system of feudal domains was abolished. It was presented as a symbolic gesture by the daimyo voluntarily returning their fiefdoms to the emperor, starting with the powerful daimyo who led the charge against the Tokugawa, such as the Choshu and Satsuma domains. In reality, the daimyo were given what was essentially a veiled order by the new government to hand over their fiefs. The daimyo initially retained nominal control over their territories as governors, creating for a few years a sort of hybrid system in which the daimyo were simultaneously feudal lords and governors. In addition, their samurai retainers were also made into government officials bound to the shokuinrei, the new civil service regulations. However, by 1871, the last remnants of the domains had been abolished. This marked the end of feudal rule in Japan and the establishment of a centralized government based in Tokyo. It also coincided with the creation of the National Conscript Army, replacing the feudal armies of the domains. The new military recruited regardless of old social classes, both commoners and former samurai. In addition to the abolishment of the feudal domains and the creation of a national army, the old social classes were being reformed. This saw the creation of four new social classes: the Kozoku, the Kazoku, the Heimin, and the Shizoku, that replaced the old Edo-era class system. The Kozoku represented the imperial family of Japan. The daimyos, as they gave up their fiefdoms, saw their social class merge with that of the Kuge, the court nobles of Kyoto, to form the Kazoku. This new class had a number of privileges, such as being made members of the House of Peers, the upper house in the Japanese parliament. Next were the Heimin, the commoners who comprised the majority of the population. One interesting change the Heimin saw during this time was that they were allowed to have family names, a right that had previously been restricted to the imperial family and the aristocracy. Lastly, there were the Shizoku, the former samurai. The Shizoku were given government stipends and were no longer restricted from taking up new professions. However, they lost many of their privileges, including the right to punish commoners who disrespected them, the requirement to cut their traditional top-knot hairstyle in 1871, and the right to carry swords in public in 1876. Under the Sword Abolishment Edict, only members of the military and police could carry swords in public, and their ranks included people from multiple classes, including commoners. In addition to these, their stipends would be cut and in 1876 replaced entirely with government bonds due to the financial burden they placed on the government. Many former samurai were forced to find employment with the government to make a living in this new era. In addition to all this, the government adopted universal male conscription, the opening of entrance exams in the military and higher education to all classes, and posts in the bureaucracy and military were made on merit rather than hereditary status. In many ways, with the loss of privileges and changes in government policy, the line between the Shizoku and the Heimin became blurry. In the decade following the overthrow of the shogun, the new government would face backlash from the former samurai, angered by the loss of their privileges, sword bans, and radical changes in Japanese society. There was also anger over the continued westernization of Japan. Many supporters of the Meiji Restoration also supported Sono Joi, meaning revere the emperor, expel the barbarian. This would culminate in several Shizoku rebellions during the 1870s, mostly taking place in Kyushu and western Honshu. There was the 1874 Saga Rebellion in northern Kyushu. In October 1876, Japan saw three more Shizoku rebellions: the Akizuka Rebellion in nearby Fukuoka, the Hagi Rebellion in Yamaguchi, and the Shinpunren Rebellion in Kumamoto. These rebellions generally only had a few hundred members each and were defeated by the imperial army, with their members either committing seppuku or being executed after capture. However, in 1877, Kyushu would see the largest of the Shizoku rebellions, the Satsuma Rebellion, led by Saigo Takamori, a hero of the Boshin War and a former high-ranking member of the government and military. In 1873, he had a falling out with other members of the government over the Sei Kanran. This was a debate over the proposed invasion of Korea that people like Saigo believed could solve the issues facing the Shizoku. When the plan was rejected, Saigo left the government and returned to Satsuma, where he established military training schools for former samurai. In 1877, as anger built over the loss of samurai privileges, Saigo and his followers staged the rebellion. It took the imperial army several months of fighting to defeat the rebel movement. Following the defeat in battle, Saigo Takamori took his own life, marking the end of the Satsuma Rebellion. In the years following the Satsuma Rebellion, Saigo Takamori became a subject of fascination in Japan. from rumors that he survived the rebellion and planned to return one day, to scholarly essays attempting to defend his actions. The government would, over time, shift its portrayal of the man from being referred to as a traitor in newspapers to his posthumous rehabilitation and the restoration of his rank by Emperor Meiji in 1891. He would also be honored with a bronze statue in Tokyo's Ueno Park. In each of the Shizoku Rebellions, Japan's conscript army, whose soldiers were largely drawn from the commoner class, emerged victorious. However, many former samurai played an important role in the shaping of the Japanese military. There was Omura Masujiro, a samurai from Choshu domain and a military reformer who commanded the Kiheitai, a militia that was formed in the lead-up to the Boshin War and was notable for including both commoners and samurai. Perhaps one of the most notable members of the Kiheitai was the former samurai of Choshu, Yamagata Aritomo. Like Saigo Takamori, Aritomo rose to prominence as a military leader of the anti-shogunate forces during the Boshin War, notably taking command of the Kiheitai following the assassination of Omura Masujiro in 1869. Following the Meiji Restoration, Aritomo became Vice Minister of Military Affairs. He would rise to further prominence for his role in suppressing the Satsuma Rebellion. In 1878, Aritomo would reform the Japanese army, basing it on the German army. In addition, he would hold several other posts in the military and administration, such as Chief of the General Quarters and Minister of the Interior. Aritomo would later be elevated to the peerage and become Prime Minister of Japan in 1889 and again in 1898. Yamagata Aritomo was not the only former samurai who would become involved in politics. There was Ito Hirobumi, originally born to a poor farming family. At the age of 14, he and his relatives were adopted by the Ito family, allowing them to enter the lower ranks of the samurai class. He was a staunch supporter of the Sono-jōi movement, even taking part in an attempt to burn down the British legation in Japan, though he would later change his views following the American and European attack on Shimonoseki, believing in the need for Japan to modernize and learn in order to face the firepower of Western nations. In 1863, Ito Hirobumi became a samurai retainer of the Choshu domain and was sent to Britain to study before returning during the attack on Shimonoseki. Following the Meiji Restoration, he held multiple government positions, participated in the Iwakura mission to the United States and Europe, and advocated for a constitutional monarchy modeled on the German system. He became Japan's first prime minister in 1885 and was appointed to the post 3 more times in 1892, 1898, and 1900. During his terms, he oversaw tax reform, the founding of the Riken Seiyukai Party, and represented Japan at the signing of the 1895 Treaty of Shimonoseki, following Japan's victory over China in the First Sino-Japanese War. He would later be appointed Resident General of Korea in 1906. Ito Hirobumi would be assassinated in 1909 by the Korean independence activist An Jung-gyun during a visit to the Chinese city of Harbin. Another former samurai who rose to prominence in Meiji-era politics was Ōkubo Toshimichi. Born to a samurai-class family serving the Shimazu clan of the Satsuma domain, like Ito Hirobumi, he joined the Iwakura mission to the United States and Europe. In the early years of the Meiji Restoration, he rose to prominence along with Saigo Takamori and another former samurai, Kido Takayoshi. Together they were known as the Isshin no Sanketsu, or the 3 great nobles of the Restoration. Ōkubo held positions in Emperor Meiji's Privy Council, as well as Minister of Finance in 1871 and Domestic Affairs in 1874. Despite being friends with Saigo Takamori, Ōkubo opposed the idea of invading Korea. He also opposed the Satsuma Rebellion, and in 1878, a group of 6 former samurai from Satsuma, who viewed Ōkubo as a traitor, assassinated him. The Shizoku class, in addition to former samurai, also included their family members and descendants. There was Yasuda Zenjirō, who was from a poor samurai family in Toyama. He ran away from home and moved to Tokyo, then Edo in 1864, to start a business of his own. Following the Meiji Restoration, Zenjirō became a major lender to the Japanese government, and later established the Yasuda Bank. He accrued so much money that by the end of the 19th century, he was considered one of the wealthiest men in Japan, and his business empire became one of the Zaibatsu, the massive corporate conglomerates of pre-World War II Japan. Another Shizoku of the Meiji era was Mori Arinori, the son of a samurai from Kagoshima. Like Ito Hirobumi, Arinori studied in Britain prior to the fall of the Tokugawa shogunate. Following the Meiji Restoration, he held several government posts and helped establish the Shoho Kojujo, the predecessor to the Hitotsubashi University. Ito Hirobumi appointed him as Minister of Education, a position he would hold until his death in 1889. Following the end of the Second World War, the Kazoku, Heimin, and Shizoku classes were abolished with the adoption of the 1947 Constitution. On one last note, this time period in Japanese history, from the mid to late 19th century, has been a popular topic in the media over the past several decades, covering the westernization and modernization of Japan and their impact on the samurai and the rest of Japanese society during the late Tokugawa shogunate and into the early Meiji era. This can be seen with jidaigeki films, video games, books, and TV series. While many of these were set during the late Edo era and the Boshin War, some took place during the Meiji era. such as the 2003 American film The Last Samurai, whose plot was inspired by the Satsuma Rebellion. There was also Rurouni Kenshin, a Japanese manga set in 1878 that received multiple adaptations in anime, live-action film, and video games. It also depicts a few historical figures, such as Yamagata Aritomo and Ōkubo Toshimichi. During the Meiji era, Japan went from a feudal state to a centralized industrializing nation. The old class system of the Edo period was abolished and replaced by a new system, with the former samurai becoming part of the new Shizoku class. They lost both their position as retainers of the feudal lords and many of their old privileges, and were forced to adapt to a rapidly changing Japan. I hope you all enjoyed the video. All sources are listed in the description. Thanks for watching.